Zoom, as well as video calls and remote meetings, have become the norm these days. Here at the SDM Foundation, we want to give you a comprehensive guide for how to navigate and operate Zoom as both a host and participant in a meeting, as well as understanding how Zoom operates as either a website or the downloadable client version. To start, we will be discussing the host side of things because without a host, there is no meeting. It also provides better insight into how a Zoom meeting and Zoom itself function in comparison to just joining meetings via links. Every Zoom meeting needs a host. A host establishes the meeting, giving it an identifying number, which is by default the host's personal meeting identification. This then allows others to be invited to the meeting. To host a Zoom meeting, the only thing you need is an account, which is free to create on the Zoom website. From the website, you may initiate hosting a meeting. However, I highly recommend that if you are planning to host regularly or want to have a better understanding of Zoom as a host or participant, that you download the client or application to your device. There can be minor variations in minor details of Zoom depending on what device you are using it on, and whether it is the client/app or if it's being used in a web browser. But overall, they operate the same way and offer the same functionality, with the browser version always being more limited regardless of the device. For example, when first logging into Zoom on your computer or phone, the initial screen/window you see will look quite different, although both offer the same features, as you can see here with the phone view and here with the computer view. We will be focusing on the client as it exists on the computer, but we'll mention key differences in a specific function from device to device. Generally speaking, it is usually layout and UI related, meaning that the things will look a bit different but can accomplish the exact same things. Let's get into Zoom and explore the client before starting a meeting. So right here we have the Zoom client opened up, and the first thing you should see is a login screen, unless yours is set to keep you signed in, which it can in some cases. And I'm going to just sign in with Google real quick, choosing my account, and then it's going to open up the client with me signed in. The first page we see in Zoom shows a schedule of upcoming meetings, which is blank if you have none that day, as well as 4 options to choose from concerning getting into a meeting right away or starting one down the line. And this is all what appears just on the Home tab, as you can see up here. We also have chat, meetings, and contacts. But first, let's go over the 4 functions that we find here in the Home tab. In the top left, the orange square is one of the several ways to start a meeting. Clicking this will take you into a meeting and initiate the setup of your audio and video. After that, you are officially hosting a meeting, albeit without any attendees. You should see your video as the majority of the screen, or your Zoom profile image with a black background. This is the Zoom meeting window/screen. Your client opens up a separate window to operate the meeting. We will come back to this later, but it is important to understand where you are when navigating your devices so you can easily replicate what you learn. And just to quickly show you that, I hit the orange button and it's already started the meeting. Now I just have to decide if I'm going to join with my audio, which I'm going to skip, and here I am. I'm ready to invite participants. And if we end the meeting we just created with the little end button here, or in the top left with X, it will ask us if we would like to leave or end the meeting for all, because we're the host, and I'm going to end the meeting for all. And it takes us right back to the Zoom client Home tab. The new meeting button also has a drop-down arrow right here. And if you click on it, it shows more options for hosting a meeting. If you want to start with the video on or off, you can toggle that here. Or if you'd like to use your personal meeting ID, or if you would rather have it auto-generated. The next function on the Home tab is Join. which, when clicked, opens a window asking you to enter the meeting ID number or to paste a copied invitation link to the meeting, your name to be seen by other members of the meeting, and if audio and or video will be on or off upon entering. And you will come to realize there are many ways to do certain things, such as join a meeting. There is no right or wrong way to join a meeting, or to start one, as long as you understand the steps you are taking along the way, making sure your settings are correct as you intended them to be. The third function on the Home tab is Schedule, which allows you to schedule meetings for future dates, and will bring up a window that allows you to set future meetings to the specifications you'd like. Each of these is straightforward, but we'll go down the list to explain each one. You can choose the date of the meeting, as well as the time frame, and if it will be a recurring meeting. You can choose if you'd like to use your personal meeting ID or have one generated automatically for this Zoom meeting. You can set the passcode, choose whether to have the waiting room on or off, as well as choose the video settings for both the host and participants by default, and what calendar you might want to sync your Zoom calendar with, as well as some advanced options here. The final function of the Home tab is the Share Screen option. In general, Share Screen is an important aspect of Zoom and will be covered much more when we discuss the Zoom meeting window, which, like I said earlier, is what you see when you actually enter a meeting. However, in this case, it is a bit more elaborate way to use the feature, so I would say ignore that unless the following is something you are interested in. Clicking on Share Screen on the Home tab will bring up a window asking for a meeting ID or sharing key. It may ask for permission to access other computer functions prior to bringing this window up. You may then enter a meeting ID or sharing key and then choose what on your screen you would like to share. That is then sent to the meeting as a shared screen, allowing participants and the host to view it. The most likely use for this would be to have one computer for screen sharing that shows a clean view of what you would like to be shared, while the host uses their personal computer to do the Zoom meeting, which would allow easier control of the meeting and more freedom when presenting. But as I said, I wouldn't worry too much about this unless you know of a way it can benefit you. You're able to do the same thing once a meeting has already started, and you can share your current screen and still run a meeting just fine. The other tabs in the Zoom client/application are fairly straightforward and may seem familiar in terms of functionality. The first of which is the Chat tab. As it suggests, this tab is for typing to one or more other Zoom participants, allowing one-on-one chats, group messages, showing all recent conversations, and the current activity level of any members of the conversation. It is a chat feature that resembles any other chat feature that you may have come across. This is also accessible in the Zoom meeting window, allowing you to quietly type a question to the host or another participant and not interrupt the meeting. The Meeting tab will show you your personal meeting ID as well as any upcoming scheduled meetings you may have. There is also the option to see any recorded meetings you may have saved. This is a feature that can be turned on and off in settings, which can be found on the Home tab in the top right corner. There is a small gear/cog symbol that will take you into settings when clicked. Settings is a good place to look to see the capabilities of Zoom. However, I would not change anything until you are comfortable using Zoom or are confident that you know what the setting change will do and can change it back if needed. The Contacts tab in Zoom is similar to contacts that you would encounter elsewhere, like for cell phones, emails, or other various accounts, allowing you to connect with some of those contact lists that you may already have if you so choose, as well as designate favorites and see the current status of contacts you have added, such as online, on a mobile version of Zoom, on a Zoom call currently, away, or offline. Before going into detail about what it is like when you are finally actually in a Zoom meeting, I'll quickly go over the ways to enter a Zoom meeting as a participant, although some of them may be obvious after seeing the host's point of view or ways you already know. The only thing you need to enter a Zoom meeting on a device connected to the internet is a link or meeting ID and password if there is a password. There is no app or client needed, no account either. So by any means that someone can send you a link to activate or any way they can communicate numbers to you is a way to receive the means to enter a Zoom meeting. And that is purposely vague because that is how numerous the ways are to get this information. Clicking a link or entering numbers either on the browser or in the app or client in the several areas to do so is the simplest way to describe it. And any details about where or how should be covered throughout this lesson. Even with scheduled or repeating meetings, if the meeting room is the same number, then any links to it should still work even if they weren't sent recently. This also applies to entering the ID number for the meeting. But if you feel lost or think you might not fully understand something, that is completely alright, and we at SDM would happily help you out and get you to a point where you can confidently say that you understand. Now we will talk about the Zoom meeting window/screen we briefly showed and I mentioned earlier. And we're going to do this from mainly the perspective of the host because the aspects of being in a meeting are extremely similar between host and participant. The participants just have less control over the meeting and less functions to access. I will highlight the differences as we go along, but generally speaking, it comes down to what I just stated about the lack of control and functions. So it is helpful for participants to understand the process and stay aware of what is happening in the moment, but even more important for hosts to smoothly execute the type of meeting they hope to have. First things first, whether you are clicking a link to a repeating meeting, entering a meeting ID you were just sent, or starting a meeting by any means, you will go through a similar process to what was described earlier, and once we have our meeting window, you're in the meeting. So I'm going to take one of those steps, which is to click on New Meeting. And here we go. I'm connected. I'm once again going to cancel audio so that the recording does not get messed up, but I will leave the video there. Okay, so the first thing to note is that we have our Zoom menu bar here, which is the main place to see the functions of your Zoom meeting. But that menu bar, by default, is going to disappear if the cursor hasn't moved over the Zoom meeting window within a short amount of time. So if you are having trouble seeing your options of what to do, try moving your mouse or interacting with the Zoom meeting window to bring up that menu. This is also something that you can change in settings to stay up instead of disappear after a few seconds. So going from left to right, join audio is fairly straightforward. This is what allows you to connect your ability to speak and hear in the Zoom meeting. And there's also a little up caret next to it that allows you to go into audio settings and to test your speaker and microphone, which is a good thing to do before joining with audio so that you know it's working correctly. Now the same applies to starting and stopping a video, as well as having the up caret to allow for more video options, like filters and backgrounds, as well as video settings, which will take you into a more in-depth settings menu. Next, we have security, which is an important tab for the host specifically. So this allows you to lock the meeting, so to not allow anyone else in or out, to enable the waiting room, which is where participants will end up once they join the meeting until the host admits them. With it enabled, they will wait in the waiting room. If I toggle this off, that means that when someone joins the meeting, they would come right into the meeting and be able to see and hear me as long as their audio is connected. You can also choose to hide the profile pictures of your participants, and you can decide what sort of features you want the participants to have access to, such as the ability to share the screen, to use the chat feature, to rename themselves, to unmute themselves, and to start their video. So you can imagine situations where these might come in handy, such as if you are giving a lecture, teaching a class, and you want to make sure that nobody is distracted by the type of things that they can do in Zoom, or generally just not paying attention or disrupting the meeting accidentally. The Participants button is what brings up this tab here on the right, which will show all current participants and allows you to interact with each of them. It also allows you to mute all participants, invite more participants, bringing up another way to invite people, as well as a more option that allows some more control over the meeting, such as mute all upon entry, meaning that once someone joins, they're automatically going to be muted. Another way to potentially stop disruption of meetings. Play the join and leave sound to give you an indication via an audio noise that people have either left or joined the meeting. Once again, another place to lock the meeting as well as enable the waiting room, and another place to allow participants to unmute themselves, rename themselves, or start video. And if we hit the up caret next participants, it just gives us another direct way to invite, which will open up the same screen as we saw when we hit invite in the participants tab. So this is a little bit of what I was referring to when I said there are several ways to go about doing the same thing. And this applies to several features in Zoom. So the chat button will bring up another tab, which takes up half of this side area that participants was in. And now you have a little chat box. And things that you type will stay there. You can choose to send it to everyone, to individuals. You can upload files to paste in the chat, as well as save the chat. And as a host, you can choose who participants can chat with, whether it's no one, host only, everyone publicly and directly. Now, this is where the share screen function is most used, and what I would imagine would be the most way anyone would go about sharing their screen, opposed to this share screen from the home tab in the Zoom client, opposed to the Zoom meeting window. So when we hit share screen in the Zoom meeting window, it brings up a separate window that allows us to choose what we would like to share, which would be desktop 1, which means it would be everything on my computer as a whole and any applications or programs that I open up in the meantime. A whiteboard, which is, as it sounds, a virtual whiteboard that you can interact with. The ability to share what is on your iPhone or iPad via cable or via AirPlay, as well as any specific programs that you currently have open. So since I have Google Chrome here in the background, I can choose to share just that, and only things I do within this web browser would show up, opposed to if I chose desktop, everything on my computer would show up. And then to initiate share, I would just hit that blue share button. But before we leave this screen, it is important to note that if you want to share your sound, so if you're going to share a video with people, you obviously want to turn the sound on. And this little checkbox is for optimizing the quality so that it can be made into a video clip. All right, and there's also some advanced features, which is using slides as a virtual background behind you, sort of like you're presenting in front of, a projector. Sharing a portion of your screen opposed to the whole desktop, so you could, mark out an area that is specific for sharing, and then everything outside of that would stay invisible. Music or computer sound only, sharing a video file, and content from a second camera. Also, you have the ability to share files with people via the share screen feature instead of sharing files through chat. And if you hit the up arrow next to share screen, it gives you some options as to how to control the meeting as the host. You can set it so that only one participant can share the screen at a time or not. And you can also go into advanced sharing options. Now, record will, as it suggests, start to record the current meeting. And that means that it won't, disrupt anything, but it will create a video file of the meeting starting from when you hit record until it's finished. That then gets saved to your computer in a default location that you can find in Zoom settings. Reactions. Reactions is an interesting aspect of Zoom because it allows you to interact in a silent manner while still showing something that's fairly emotive. So, if you would like to applaud, you can do so and represent that. And that shows up in several places, as you can see. And you can imagine the various different uses for this function, and it makes for a lot less, audio chaos when trying to convey something in a meeting that has a large number of participants as well as the host. This button up here with the two arrows will allow you to make your video or your Zoom meeting window full screen, and then also to put it back down to a windowed size if it is full screen. Some functions in a meeting only appear depending on the number of participants. So since I am just hosting this meeting for myself, I don't have the option to use breakout rooms, which I will go over in a moment once I start a different meeting with a participant. To get an idea of some of the functions that you can have when there are more than one participant in a meeting, we are going to have myself join a different account. So this also gives us a bit of a better look at what the waiting room is. So having the waiting room enabled or disabled is what allows for this. So with it enabled, then that's where I go when I enter the meeting. And for the host to allow me to actually enter, they would have to admit. And now this brings up a few new features. So one of the first things is the view. So this changes from just being a full screen option to having speaker view, gallery view, and also full screen. So the speaker view will put the speaker as the main focus of the Zoom meeting. I think right now the visual you're getting with that is a little bit backwards. But speaker view is what would allow someone to be the forefront of the conversation. So whoever is speaking gets put up as the big picture and everyone else is small, whereas gallery makes everybody equal. Another thing to take note of now that we have a participant is that the host is able to go over to the participant and click on more to do various interactions with the participant, such as ask them to start the video, make them the host of the call, rename them on your own, put them back in the waiting room, remove them, or report them. There should also be the function to spotlight them if there were more participants. So if we had, I think, at least 4 participants, I could spotlight this account of mine, making it so that that account is going to be the speaker view account until spotlight is turned off. Another feature that has changed now that we have a participant in here is in the chat box you are able to choose the individual to send it to now. I know I said that that was an option, but you don't see that as an option until there is another participant to interact with. Thank you for joining us today. Please contact us for an appointment if we can help you further.